dekan fakultas yang kebetulan hari ini karena ada rapat penting di rektorat tidak bisa hadir. Kemudian juga dari jurusan Departemen of Biology yang juga hadir pada hari ini. Nanti sebelum mulai saya akan minta sedikit sambutan dari ketua jurusan, dan setelah itu kita langsung bisa mulai karena pertemuan ini lebih seperti sharing dari Pak Philip dan Pak Andreas untuk kami, dan memang saya memperkecil seremonial semaksimal mungkin supaya waktu Bapak sudah terbatas, dan juga karena kita menghindari kerumunan juga. Di lewat live streaming mahasiswa pasca sarjana, we have now this year, jadi ada departemen Magister in Agriculture, Magister in Law, and Magister in Management. Tetapi yang akan hadir di sini yang lewat live streaming itu Magister in Agriculture. Ya, saya kira itu, dan untuk selanjutnya kami akan minta dari ketua jurusan biologi untuk berikan kata sambutan dan membuka acara ini. Kami silakan. Mana aja?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our God for His all of blessing. And first, I want to greet our presenter, our guest, Dr. Andreas Moller and Dr. Philip Suter. Welcome to Bangka Belitung. Welcome to Department of Biology, Faculty of Agriculture, Fisheries and Biology. I want to say welcome to biology, and I hope you can enjoy your time here. Dan juga saya ingin menyampaikan terima kasih kepada Pak Edi. Terima kasih sudah mampu menginisiasi kegiatan yang sangat luar biasa ini. And I want to say thank you for Prof. Rusni. Terima kasih Bu yang bisa memandu nanti untuk mentranslasikan supaya materi-materi yang luar biasa dari Dr. Andreas dan Dr. Philip nanti bisa diserap dengan baik oleh seluruh peserta. Itu saja mungkin yang ingin saya sampaikan. Untuk para mahasiswa, para undangan, mari kita sama-sama mengikuti kegiatan yang luar biasa ini. Semoga kita dapat memperoleh manfaatnya. Saya akhiri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Pak Rahmat, Dr. Rahmat. Untuk Pak Andreas dan Pak Philip di hadapan Bapak berdua, ini selain mahasiswa dari dua program studi yang hadir, saya lihat ini mungkin nanti akan muncul yang hadir secara offline, juga Bapak Ibu dosen dari biologi dan dari agroteknologi yang ada di sini. Dan mungkin ada tamu undangan yang lain yang saya mungkin tidak bisa saya ketahui. Kemudian saya memberi sambutan untuk biodata kedua pembicara. Jadi Bapak Ibu, Dr. Philip ini adalah biolog yang berstudi di Science Universitas Hannover, Jerman. Kemudian doktornya di Universitas Geneva, Swiss. Kemudian bergabung di Institut Federal Jerman, Bgr itu tahun 2010. Kemudian bekerja di bagian sumber daya alam di unit pertambangan dan keberlanjutan. Tahun 2015 beliau bertanggung jawab pada proyek kerjasama Bgr di Afrika dan tinggal di Rwanda dan Burundi. Kemudian pada tahun 2015 pindah ke Hannover dan bertanggung jawab pada proyek internasional dan kegiatan penelitian. Kemudian sebagian besar karyanya menyangkut rantai pasokan mineral dan logam serta praktik pertambangan yang bertanggung jawab. Kemudian beliau adalah spesialis untuk komoditi mineral tantalum, kobalt, dan emas. Namun juga mengerjakan timah, lithium, tembaga dan nikel. Presentasi ini beliau akan menyampaikan mengenai kerjasama yang dilakukan oleh Bgr dengan Bangka tahun 2016 sampai 2019. Kemudian Dr. Andreas Muller meraih gelar sarjana geografi di University of Erlangen, kemudian doktor di ilmu tanah dan geografi University of Delft. Mengenai judulnya adalah dinamika materi organik di ekosistem hutan pegunungan di Thailand. Menjadi 12 tahun menjadi dosen di University of Hanover sampai 2017, kemudian bekerja 2 tahun di kantor pertambangan energi dan geologi, departemen dari pertanian, proteksi tanah dan perencanaan wilayah. Dan sejak 2001 beliau bergabung sebagai peneliti di Bgr dengan fokus bahan organik, cadangan karbon, biochar dan reklamasi tanah. Nanti beliau akan menyampaikan mengenai penambangan timah di Bangka, kerusakannya, kemudian bagaimana untuk memperbaikinya. Lalu dengan beberapa contoh dari contoh reklamasi yang dilakukan oleh Bgr di air kundur di penyambung Sungai Liat. Saya kira itu biodata singkat dan abstrak. Untuk selanjutnya saya persilakan ke Dr. Philip untuk memulai presentasi ini, mungkin 20, 30, 20, 30 minutes, and then its panelists also then move to Pak Andreas. Setelah itu baru question and answer. Ya, terima kasih.
But can you help us to activate this? Reclamation Handbook or wait, I'm putting this to full screen now. Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to be here, Andreas and me. First of all, I want to thank Pak Eddy and the Biology Department for inviting us here for giving this presentation. Since you might not know the Bgr, I wanted to give you at first a brief overview of what the Bgr is. Here on this map you can see Hanover in Germany. This is where the headquarters of Bgr is located. So it is more or less between Berlin and the Netherlands. We are called the Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources. This is a department of the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And we have 3 main jobs, main tasks. So the first one is to advise the German government, but also the industry and the society on all questions of natural resources and geosciences. Second, we do international cooperation projects. And third, we do geoscientific research activities. We have about 750 employees, technical staff like Andreas and me, as well as administrative staff. And we are organized in 4 technical departments. I'm associated with a department on natural resources, which then has a mining department, and Andreas is associated with this department on groundwater and soil. So the Bgr has been here in Bangka and Belitung, as Pak Eddy said, from 2016 until 2019. And we have implemented something called the Pilot Cooperation Exchange, or we say the abbreviation is the PCE. And the PCE had 3 objectives. The first objective was to have a reclamation of a site called Ayakundur 3, which is inside Bangka Regency, and it is on the IUP, on the mining concession area of PT Timah. And the objective was to make the reclamation of that pilot site. And the second objective of the PCE was to facilitate knowledge exchange among different Indonesian experts on reclamation. And then the third objective was to develop a Reclamation Handbook and share our experience with this handbook. So with PT Timah here in Bangka and with the provincial government of Bangka and Belitung. And the motivation for Bgr to engage in this PCE, it was to gather experience on the topic of reclamation, or more specifically tin mine reclamation, and also to raise awareness on this topic. And we are interested in this based on the concept of responsible supply chains. And I want to give you a brief explanation what it means when we talk about responsible supply chains. So what you can see here is the so-called upstream and downstream supply chain of minerals and metals. The upstream supply chain means you are having a mine where you produce the minerals, for example tin. You have the processing, the smelting and the refining, which is going on here in Bangka. And then you have the downstream supply chain of the minerals. And that is where you have the fabrication of components and the manufacturing of products and so on. So if we take the example of tin, which is very important, for example, in smartphones, you know, the smartphone manufacturing and the component manufacturing then takes place in Vietnam, China, South Korea, and then the products are eventually sold in Germany and in the US and in other places. So here in Indonesia, we have local regulations which govern the mining, which govern the environmental and the economic and the social impact that the mining is generating. And it's important to consider also reclamation as a part of that, because mining is always a cycle. You do the exploration, then you mine, and then all the minerals have been removed, and then you have to make the rehabilitation and reclamation of your area. So there are local regulations here, but when you look at the downstream side, in Germany, for example, also we have regulations. And those regulations concern the sourcing of minerals. It means how we purchase them. And also we have customer expectations of the people who buy the cell phones and so on. So most of those customer expectations and regulations in Germany or in the European Union, they are concerned with the question, first of all, which metals do I have in my products? For example, if we have one smartphone, there's tin, there's tantalum, there's gold, there are many different metals. So we want to understand what is actually included in those smartphones and where do those metals come from. And then the second part is we want to make sure that they are produced in a responsible way. This is called supply chain due diligence. But as a Bgr, we want to emphasize that it is not only the active production of the minerals which is important, but it is also, if you think about the mining cycle, you have to think about the question what happens later after the mining has finished. And on Bangka and on Belitung, you can see this problem very clearly, that you have some mining areas that they have not been rehabilitated, and so we have to think about this as well, even if we are living in Germany or in the European Union. And there are different ways of engagement in responsible supply chains. So what we did here in the PCE, it is like information exchange and mutual cooperation, which, as I explained, we did with different stakeholders here in Bangka. Also, when you look at the industry, they often formulate supplier requirements. It means they formulate standards which they expect their suppliers to fulfill. And then you have a chain of requirements which goes all along the supply chain, from the downstream back to the upstream supply chain. And you have in general different types of international standards, guidance documents, how you want to do responsible mining and refining activities, and you have different management processes in order to implement this. For example, you have corporate risk management by companies, you have public reporting. Also here in Indonesia, for example, PT Timah is doing public reporting. You have certification, you have codes of conduct, and you have other instruments. So all this together is what we call responsible supply chains. And for us, for Bgr, it's important that we consider reclamation as a part of that framework. And now you can ask the question, why is it that we want to have this pilot project just here on Bangka? What is the relation to Germany? So first of all, when you look at the global production of tin, I'm sure you know that Indonesia is the second largest tin producer in the world. It's producing more or less 25% of the global tin from mine production. And so it is a very important region to source tin from. And then if you look at Germany, actually Germany is one of the biggest international importers of refined tin. And most of our refined tin is actually coming from here, from Indonesia. It's about 26% of our imports. Number 2 is Belgium, which is recycled tin. And number 3 is Peru, where we also have some tin mines, but the most important part is coming from Bangka. So it means that if we think about responsible supply chains in Germany, at the Bgr, we think there's also responsibility for having this connection to Indonesia and for being concerned about the mining in Indonesia, but also the reclamation of the mines here in Indonesia. And that is why we discussed with ASTM and with other partners to start this PCE. So the PCE, it had these different stakeholders that were involved in it. Actually, one of the initial initiatives of the ideas came out of discussions with Pak like 6 or even 7 years ago. It's a long time ago. And then for implementation, we worked with different stakeholders here in Indonesia, with the universities of Bogor and Bandung, and with the provincial government here in Bangka Belitung, as well as with ASTM in Jakarta. And we also worked with PT Timah in the end, because the reclamation site is on their concession. And we worked with a local village where the site is located, which is Bukit Layang, and also with Telapak, with an NGO. This is an overview on the implementation steps of our activities between 2016 and 2019. So basically, the first was a lot of time was spent to make the formal framework between Bgr and ESDM. And then also we spent a lot of time in order to select the pilot site for reclamation where certain conditions were fulfilled, which made it possible for us to work there. And then we undertook additional planning activities. Those consist of a community engagement process, which was implemented by Telapak. And we had an evaluation of the hydrology and of the geological risk of the site by the Bandung University. And then we developed a reclamation plan that was developed by the University of Bogor. And this is an overview of the plan that they developed for the site, for the Ayapundur 3 site. Basically, this is an 18-hectare size area, and they propose that we have 2 different parts in that area. One they call conservation area, where we grow trees for forest, and the other one is an agricultural area where the village of Ayapundur, they can grow certain types of vegetables and rubber trees and things like that. So after we had finished the project last year, actually, PT Timah and ASTM, they agreed that they want to make a change on this agricultural area, and they converted it to grow palm oil. But before, when we were here working, that was still the vegetable area. So then this second part of the timeline shows you the implementation, the actual practical implementation of the activities. So we first had to find a contractor for implementing reclamation, which was a company here called CBAPU. We did the landscaping, we did the infrastructure, the planting activities, maintenance, and some additional erosion prevention. This took most of the time from 2018 until early 2019. And then we had a handover of that area to PT Timah, and PT Timah then took over the responsibility for maintenance and monitoring of that site. And what we also did, in parallel to this practical implementation, we started working on the Reclamation Handbook, which was developed by different experts, and we had different workshops, in total 5 workshops here in Bangka, to discuss with the PCE partner on how we implement different steps. This is just an overview on the reclamation side, and I just want to mention this here, that we had a big problem with erosion in the beginning, because we have a river which is just north, on the northern end of the site, and when there was a rainy season, there was a lot of flooding coming from that river, and also there was a lot of erosion on the river banks. And that's why we tried to implement some erosion protection eventually. You can see on those photographs here the damage which was caused by the flooding and the erosion marks. And then later on we implemented some measures to avoid the erosion, because it is the strongest when we do not yet have the plant cover and we just have the bare ground. It is very susceptible to erosion. And this is just to give you an overview on the planting progress. This is just using the example of sengon trees. So we planted them in January 2019, in the beginning of the rainy season. In February, you already could observe some cover crops forming, and in July of that year, already in some areas, the cover crops and the sengon were growing really well. And just yesterday, we visited that site, and now the sengon trees are really big, and the cover crops as well. So I think from a biological point of view, at least, this area where you had a lot of rather infertile soil and a lot of tin tailings and so on, it has been stabilized. There's a lot of biological activity there, and also there's erosion protection. This is an overview on the costs that we encountered for the reclamation process. So in total, we paid more or less $8,000 for 1 hectare, which is more than what Petitima is paying usually. But of course, Petitima, they have their local organization here, and they have their contractors, so it is much easier and possible for them to have synergy effects, economies of scale, which we do not have as Bgr. So I think it is normal that we have to pay more. In total, for the 18 hectares, we paid about net costs $145,000. And what you can see on the pie chart is how we spend it, on which different types of costs. So the planting holes and the maintenance of the plant and the plant procurement, that was the biggest portion. In total combined, it was about 40%. And then the landscaping work and the erosion protection, that's the second best, biggest proportion. That came to about 36% if you add the different positions. And then some additional funds were spent on infrastructure and other activities. So when we talk about reclamation, people always emphasize that social, economic questions are quite important. So we try to involve the village of Bukit Layang into this process. In the initial baseline assessment, we saw there's about 900 households with 3,000 people living in that area. And actually this area, it has a long history of informal people mining of tin ore. So one of the ideas was to give the people an alternative to the tin mining, so they just don't go to the Ayapundur side and they do informal mining. What we also saw is actually a problem for the business model of reclamation in this area, because many people in that village, they did not have a lot of experience with farming. So in the reclamation plan, we said let's have an agricultural area with farming activities, but the people were actually not very familiar with it, many of them, and that is a certain challenge. But nonetheless, when we started to plant the vegetables, the village organization, the BUMDES, they were able to generate some revenues from selling those different vegetables. You can see on this chart here, several million Indonesian rupiah in total. The key challenge is, of course, what's happening between the community and the mine site after the handover of this site. So in 2019, in February, Bgr handed over the reclamation site to Petitima, and now it will be necessary to Petitima, together with the provincial government, to find solutions. What is the long-term business model for the community, but also they still have to sort out that question, what is the status of that area? For example, the IUP might end in 2025, but it is not sure yet. So we have to clarify also what happens afterwards in terms of land ownership and so on. Another thing was that with PCE we discussed a lot if it is better to have a cooperative to manage an area or BUMDES. Some people said it is better to have a cooperative, but because they did not have any yet, we cooperated with the BUMDES instead. But even with the BUMDES, we realized that they need actually capacity building and in terms of business capacities and in terms of financial management. Even though, for example, at first for the reclamation, we wanted to give the contract for reclamation to the BUMDES, but we realized they do not have the financial capacity. So instead, we worked with another company who then subcontracted part of the work to the Bundes. This is an overview of the Reclamation Handbook that we also established towards the end of that PCE project. It's, the idea of this is that it is a public document which can be accessed by people in Germany if they want to know what are the challenges of reclamation and how can they move in order to make the reclamation work in a good way. And at the same time, it's available in Bahasa Indonesia here for people who are interested in this topic. Of course, there are specialists in PT Timah who have many internal regulations about the reclamation process, but those documents are usually internal and they are not available to the public. So that is the advantage that we have with this handbook. And this handbook was developed by different universities, involved in the PCE, and it has a modular structure. It means if you are interested in a certain topic, let's say erosion protection or planting holes or whatever, you can just jump to that topic. You don't actually have to read the whole handbook. The idea is to make it as practical as possible for the readers. And it's aligned with the regulations here in Indonesia. And also it includes overview on the different pilot projects here in Bangka on tin mine reclamation. Because when we implemented the PCE, we realized that there are many different projects like this. Local projects implemented by different universities and ministries, as well as even international projects. And so we included like a short overview on all of those projects, 11 projects at that time in the annex of that handbook. Now just an overview on our next activities before Andreas takes over. The reason why we're here now, Andreas and me, is because we want to have a long-term monitoring of the reclamation process at Ayapundur. As you know, reclamation and initial maintenance is for 3 years, but the question is what happens after 5 years or even what happens after 10 years. So we just want to observe and monitor the evaluation of that area in terms of soil development, vegetation, and also socio-economic developments. And on top of that, we are also planning to have a new cooperation project in Indonesia, which will circle on the topic of reclamation and forest protection. So that is a project which then would be funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. They have big cooperation projects with Indonesia implemented by different German and Indonesian partners on different topics. And one of the big topics in this for the German Development Cooperation is forest protection. And so they said, based on this experience of the PCE, which showed that there's a need for reclamation of mining areas, they thought it is a good idea if we include in this forest protection program in the future some activities to support mine reclamation. So this project is being planned right now and in the next year, and then hopefully it can start to be implemented in 2024. It will focus not only on tin mining in Bangka, but it will also look at coal in Kalimantan and nickel mining in Sulawesi or Maluku. So it is dealing with these different reclamation frameworks. And it should be implemented together again with different Indonesian partners, universities, industry, civil society, and then of course some government ministries. And the content, it will be similar to the PCE. So basically it's about improving the planning and the monitoring of sustainable reclamation. It's about to promote stakeholder exchange and to promote networking among Indonesian experts, maybe also involve some international experts in this. And finally, we also want to have some practical demonstration sites or even learning centers for reclamation. So that is my end of the presentation. I will hand over to Andreas now. I just want to briefly thank all our partners in the PCE who supported us, not only ESTM and the provincial government and PT Timah, but also, for example, Pak Eddy, because he shared many initial ideas with us and gave some advice, and Husni and Ihsan and other people who supported us as well. And now, over to you, Andreas. I will open the presentation. Ya, Mas.
Bisa pakai mikrofon kalau mau. Ada mikrofon, please.
Should I use a microphone?
Oh,
I think I'm loud enough. So. ship something first. Thank you, Daddy, for inviting us here to the university, and thank you for the forestry department to give us a chance to give a talk here to young students and also well-known improved scientists. So I'm really happy to give here a talk about the reclamation of tin mining from the soil protection perspective, because I think it's very important to know about sustainability and about soil functions, to know how reclamation should be done in a way that it should be also sustainable for the future. So sustainability in general has a lot of aspects. It's not only the improvement of economic functions, it's also the governance, it also has a social component, it has also an economic component, because if you only see the environmental input, people may not be happy about the results, so also the people have to be happy what you're doing in the field of reclamation. And it's a special situation here on Bangka. Bangka, you have always the problem that a site which has been already reclaimed may be mined again. This is something we have to protect the land to do in the future, to go on with this practice in the future. But if you want to protect the land, you have to find somehow a business model where the people can have benefits from it and not going to mine it again. And so you need somehow a business model for the land you have to want to protect in the future. But this business model has to be also accepted by the local population. You always can have an ideal idea, you want to have perfect forests again, or you want to have an agricultural site like we did. If the local population doesn't want it, you will never be able to have a successful reclamation at the end. But also, on the other hand, you have to also need the promotion of the government, because the government also gives the regulations, and these regulations are needed. For example, usually you're only allowed to grow forests in a certain area of reclamation. But if you want to do something else, you have to maybe also adapt the regulations in the future. So it depends what the local community would like to have. The definition of the United Nations for sustainability is sustainable land management is the use of land resources, including soil, water, animals, and plants, for the production of goods to meet changing human needs. And this is the thing about it. For changing human needs, it changes. Before, we have now a lot of palm oil production in Indonesia, so there's also a need for this to be managed in the future, while simultaneously ensuring the long-term production potential of these resources and the maintenance of their environmental functions. So we have to include in reclamation areas, so we have to restore the environmental functions of the soil, of the areas, but we also maintain the potential to produce things on this land. Measures for sustainable land management are therefore to prevent land conservation and protect vulnerable lands. This is also something we can also include in reclamation, because if we see it later in a different slide, if you use ex-mining land with sensible, you can also protect the vulnerable land on the other hand. Prevent and mitigate land degradation and restore degraded land. This is very important. Mining destroys land. This degrades the soil very much. The fine particles will be washed out, and you will only leave sand and gravel at the end. Control soil erosions. That's what we heard from Philip's talk already. At the beginning, when we leveled, we had a severe soil erosion problem. improve soil water storage. This is also, if we have a bare soil, we'll have a high runoff, so we lose a lot of water. While if you have a dense vegetation, you can store much more water, and if you have more organic matter, you can also store more organic matter in soil. So it is also management of soil organic matter. Carbon sequestration is a very, very important subject, because also mining, you will lose all the organic matter stored in soils. And also manage enhanced soil fertility, sure, this is also important. Promote integrated soil crop management and also integrated agroforestry. Well, this is also some things where you can improve sustainable land management in the future. But if you come from sustainable land management, you have also to see soil functions. Soils have a lot of functions which are important for humankind. Soils deliver essential system services that enable life on Earth. Without soils, we can't live on Earth. Soils are not renewable. This is also something very important, because if we lose our soils, they are gone. And soil functions lost are potentially lost forever. So we have to really look on our soils and should improve them after degradation. So in some terms, if you lose, for example, in the Mediterranean area in Europe, we have lost a lot of soils. It's a long time ago already. But if you want to have 1 centimeter of new soil, it may take hundreds of years to build up again. So this is important to keep our soils. So what kind of soils functions do we have? Soils are on the one hand, they regulate climate, but also they are important for nutrient cycling. So it's, if you have no vegetation, you will also no animals, you will also get no nutrients into soil, but the soil are a buffer for this kind of input, and also important to take up for plants nutrients again. It's a habitat for microorganisms. In one handful of soil, there can live more microorganisms than humankind are on Earth. So it's billions of microorganisms that can live in a small part of the soil. And this is also very important, because in these kind of different microorganisms, you have a lot of different pharmaceuticals or chemicals which they produce, which is a really big potential for the future for medicine, and also for our health, to be found out that these are new substances for the industry and for everybody. But also soils are important for flooding systems, or for flood protection, because they store the moisture, they infiltrate the rain and store the rain. If you have only open land, like after mining, you will have the problem. When I was coming here in 2016, the first time, we had this big flooding here on Bangka, which destroyed a lot of bridges. And mining is one reason of this big flooding events, because you have a lot of open space, so the water can fastly run off and can produce flooding risks. Well, we also build our houses on soil. We produce our food on soil. So it's, and we also sequester carbon in our soil. The soil is the third biggest carbon storage pool on Earth. It's only our geological stored carbon is higher, and also only the stored carbon in oceans is higher. The third biggest carbon pool are our soils. And mining these soils, you will lose all the carbon through the process. So recovering organic carbon in the soil is very, very important. That's so we have now learned about the soil functions, but while mining, we have a lot of degradation, but we have somehow competing land uses. That's what I also wanted to say from the beginning. Well, we have the used land, you have cropland, for example. And now I use an example from palm oil. Palm oil is planted everywhere now in Indonesia. It's getting more and more bigger and bigger. Well, it's an important economic resource for Indonesia. But if you go to the unused land, for example, protected areas, protected forests, or areas worth protecting, or even natural forests which are not protected, but if you go there to produce palm oil, you will have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and you will have a habitat destruction. So using the unused land, or degraded land, the ex-mining land, that's full. For example, for palm oil or for cropland, you can also use it for succession land to bring back the land to his stage what it was before. But to use this land probably is you need a high input because you have to restore the soils again. But you will protect on the other side maybe natural forests which are worth protecting. So this is the direct land use change, but you also have an indirect land use change as a competing land use. The problem is if you have a cropland and you want to plant palm oil there on the cropland, you will always have the farmer will go somewhere else because they want to earn still money. So they will go maybe to the unused land, to the protected area, or to the unused degraded land. And so there's also a possibility, why not using the unused land? You have to, you need some more subsidies or something like this to use it, but it can be used and can protect other areas like which are much more worth protecting. And you can store carbon. You don't have an uncontrolled greenhouse gas emissions, and you don't have further habitat destruction if you use more the ex-mining land for agriculture, other aspects. So we have these competitive scenarios which you have on Bangka. You have the mining land, you have palm oil, you have cropland, for example, and you have forests. And all have this special kind of competitive scenario. The soil functions are the biggest in a natural forest because they have the highest biodiversity. They can store water, they produce, they can sequester carbon, they produce oxygen for us. So this is, for ecosystem functions, this is the highest, the best place to do it, but people can't earn money from it. So on the other side you have croplands, where you have a high investment, you have less biodiversity, but you have a long-term income if you have cropland. And you have palm oil, which on the one hand gives also long-term income, but has less soil functions, has less biodiversity, because there's only palm oil that is growing there. You need maybe also less investment, but you have, from the side of use of pesticides and other things, you may have also a high contamination potential on palm oil areas. So it's always to find out what's the best solution for the land. In mining land, sure, you get only a high income, you have less investment, but it's no soil functions and also no biodiversity. So mining in the long term is not good, or ex-mining land is not good for the community in total. So Indonesia already has really good regulations on mining. So that's what we gathered in our project here. But are these regulations, or is reclamation really enough to protect the land for remining again? So this is the questions we also thought about in the project. So do we need more? Do we need an investor afterwards? Because if the land is not worth protecting afterwards, we will get remining again. So one focus is really of reclamation is the focus on gain soil fertility, to have a land which is productive enough to be protected in the future. So this is, in my eyes, this is the actual situation of how it is in Bangka. We have the legal mining concession holders. They do reclamation of their site, and afterwards you will have the post-mining activities. And this is something which has to be clarified. Who is responsible for these kind of lands? Is it the owner, the landowners, is the government, or is it also maybe the international industry, which really helps to reclaim these soils in the future? So we did also, I hope it will work, we will get also the tone, and we also did a small video documentation of our project, and we put it on the Geo channel, Bgr Geo channel. You could find it on YouTube. I will give a short sequence out of this film to show the problem of reclamation of mining on Bangka. No problem. So, sorry. Should have tried it before.
Oke. Atau di microphone itu bisa.
But it's a problem is it doesn't, the computer should go usually. It's maybe because it's hard. That's what Philip said. If you didn't try before, you may get in trouble in the end. No, it's okay. Yeah. Sorry, it's now because it's with HDMI, it doesn't work. I may turn it around and you will see. Sorry, only a small video. Not good? Too small? Too small. Okay, then I try to tell it in the. Now it will work, because then you also need an.
Kamu bisa bantu.
Okay. Probably. No. Okay, let me do it without the phone. Sorry. Okay. The thing is about the thing is about reclamation that as I already said, that you have a lot of open mining areas, and these mining areas, and while mining, it's always while the real small scale miners coming always in again. You have this kind of destroyed there's this landscape which has a lot of ponds and a lot of heaps, and it's really very difficult to be used again. So you need a lot of input to reuse the land in the future. So this is what we now face, how the challenges of reclamation on Bangka. What can we do to go on? So we have to improve the soil, but improving the soil, you need a lot of organic matter to improve it. So, but compost is rare on Bangka. As I said before, we need a community engagement. So we need to include the people, the surrounding people, in the process of reclamation. We need an erosion control because we already lost a lot of fine particles while mining. So if you now lose again soil particles, you will even degrade the soils further on. So soil erosion, minimizing soil erosion is important. Flood control on the site, on-site and also off-site is very important, as also Philip already told us. Because we had severe erosion, especially at the beginning when the soil is bare, but also the downstream erosion is important. You need a business plan, and you need maybe also land use planning, and also a certain plant selection, also fits the local population and also the area you want to reclaim, do the reclamation. However, still, this is separated during the mining process. The particles are separated you will have the problem that you may have only gravel and sand left. On the other hand, you have maybe a lot of clay left, and where for finer particle sediment again. So you may have to adapt your input depending on the soil is left on the area. Usually also in mining you may store topsoil, so you take away the topsoil and mine only the subsoil, but this is also not done here in Bangka, so you don't have any fertile soil to put in the area. So you need material which could improve the soil at the end. So what we did in our project, we tried to be a little more innovative, and because we didn't have enough compost, so compost is rare in Bangka, so we used biochar, or the charcoal from the palm oil fruit branches, which are during the production in the palm oil industry, you will have a lot of this material. This material has organic matter, but it has also the ash in this material has also high pH. So it's improving the pH of the soil in the area. Additionally, we need a lot of organic matter inside. We use rice husk and chicken manure to improve the soil, but also the nutrient status of the soil, and we use some natural soil because we need some more clay material for water holding capacity and also to keep the nutrients into the soil. The organic matter, especially the biochar, is there alkaline deposit, so very high pH. On the other hand, you have the surrounding soils which have a very low pH. So the trees can somehow look with their roots what kind of nutrients they get in what kind of area. If possible, it's always to add more organic matter. Organic matter is always good if you have a source where you can get more organic matter. It's always a source to fastly improve the soil fertility. And surely also the plant selection is important, because in flooding areas you may use other plants than in higher areas or in sandy soils or in clay soils. So every kind of this is a very important thing about the reclamation process. This Philip also already showed. We had severe erosion problems. Erosion control measures are important. So you can do some drainage, slope diagonal drainage systems. You can do terracing. Cover crops are very important, but cover crops had a big problem in the beginning, because if you only plant cover crops, in the first year they will grow quite slow because they have not much nutrients. So maybe we should have also given to the cover crops additional organic fertilizers or something like this. You should plant leguminous, enhance plant growth, and in the first years the priority that management should be erosion control, weed control, and then nitrogen input. So it's much more important that you get first cover crops, and then maybe you plant afterwards leguminous or other plants. So important is in the first year, after leveling, immediately as fast as possible to get a plant cover over the soil. So flood risk is also something very important. So what we did on site, we did a dam, we built a dam, and we stabilized the dam with bamboo. We did to drainage the area, but we also in some area we had also built a floodplain. And maybe this is even the better solution if you have along the river something like a floodplain with resistant plants to reduce the speed of the water flow. Because if you have these areas where water can go on, you protect your area, but you protect also the area for downstream flood risks. This is some pictures I took in 2016. We destroyed bridges and on Bangka flooded areas. So if you have a lot of bare soil, you will get a higher runoff. And especially the mining is along the river, and so you have along the river you have a lot of bare soil, and also the rivers are sometimes channeled, so it's the speed of the river is even more increasing. You don't have floodplains anymore because the mining is going next to the river, and you have a lot of palm oil plantations. Also, palm oil plantations, you have quite high runoff compared to natural forests also. So, and on the other hand, if you have mining areas, you have a high sediment load. Also, this high sediment load combined with water has a high, can cause big damages to infrastructure. So, reclamation is also very good. Good reclamations are very good for downstream flood risks. So, therefore, to reduce this downstream flooding risks, you should. What is already in Indonesian regulations, you need a 50 meters floodplain along the rivers. You should select plants which are designed to slow down the river, but also which are capable with flooding events. Shouldn't do channeling, and you should do terracing and other erosion protection measures. But this has to be on the watershed scale. So, because the water will come on from the whole watershed, and therefore these measures has to be done on the watershed level to protect cities or other areas or infrastructure for flooding events. So therefore it is also important to improve land use planning, because it's an example from Belitung here, a map of Belitung. Reclamation has to be adapted to the local situation. So which plant grow well on which side, but which products can also be sold in the area, or can be transported to Jakarta or whatever. So it's, like I said, it's a business model is needed. And how far can it be transported? This is also important. In our side, we produce vegetables which could only be locally sold, because the tomato couldn't be transported for a long distance. So we couldn't sell it for example, in Jakarta or in other bigger cities. So this is something we also have to include. We have to do a land use planning, getting this idea, or within the reclamation, getting these ideas where we should plant palm oil, where we should do agriculture or and forest and other things. So this idea should be also included into reclamation in the future. So what did we do in Aircon 203? Well, Philip also already told us a few things about it. And when we see that was the picture of 2014, it was ex-mining land, it was a lot of different kinds of ponds and hills and everything. So we did the leveling, so we could fill a lot of ponds. And you see here, this is in the middle is the agricultural side. You already see here we did some natural soil. It's the beginning, so it's and here we added some biochar. It's a black thing. Well, usually everything was added, but it's a good thing that this satellite image now show us the difference. And at the end, 2019, we were already a lot of plants were growing. We had already quite a good coverage of the plants of the area. So how did we improve the agricultural area? We added natural soil, then we added charcoal on top, quite a lot. We plowed it in and it mixed the soil quite well. So at the end we could have planting rows where we could very goodly grow very well, where a lot of tomatoes, where corn, where aubergine and chili was growing very well. So we realized with our input of soil improvement, we could change the soil to a fertile soil again. And all the plants were growing very well. Even though I have to say that the local community were no farmers in the end, they didn't go on farming because they thought palm oil it's a better investment than farming in this area. But we showed in our project that it could be possible to get out of ex-mining land fertile agricultural land. Similar things we did in the forestry area. There we added in planting holes, we added natural soil, we added charcoal, and we added rice husk with chicken manure. It was mixed, and then the trees were planted. So these trees have now, it was about, let's say, 50 by 50 centimeters deep planting hole, where the trees have a nutrient deposit. But the people who wanted to take over the land, they are not really much interested about the fruit trees. So therefore, there was no maintenance, and thus all the other plants were growing too fast, so that the fruit trees didn't grow as good as we hoped at the end. So, in general, we see this sustainable reclamation is possible with potential high benefits for the local population. If the local population really wants the fruit trees and really wants the agriculture, it would have worked very well, we have to say. So ex-mine land can be changed. You will really, if you don't own the land, you don't really protect it. So this is also a big problem about Indonesia. But we see you can do it, but you have really to, the land use planning is really important. So including the local population is really important to have at the end a perfect reclamation in one side. So what are the questions open for against remining? So does the special situation of Bangka and Beli do more in reclamation? And I say yes, it needs more. It needs a business plan afterwards, because if not, you will have remining again. Does the existing regulations have to be completed? Maybe, I say this way, because if you can only grow trees in a certain area and you can't do agricultural areas out of this, it's maybe a pity. Maybe the land can maybe be better used for agriculture than for forestry, for example. How to solve short-term versus long-term ownership responsibility on the site. This is something really which is not solved in Indonesia. So the ownership is a real big question. And how to organize co-fundings from mining companies or investors. This is also not really, so how do you, like Petitima, they only do the reclamation. So they plant trees and they see that the area is getting green again. But if you wanted to protect from remining again, you need maybe additional funds. You need an investor. You need an idea how to use post-mining use for the post-mining use of these areas. And this is the question: who are the potential investors? Is it only the palm oil industry, or is it also others, which could be, for example, the blue columns could be touristic, could be other ideas to use these areas in the future. And do we have to use to include land use planning in the political promotion or enforcement of environmental friendly reclamation systems? Because I also don't think that only doing palm oil at the end will be a good solution for reclamation areas. So we need some areas which we get natural forest again, because some areas we have agriculture, with some areas for palm oil in the future. So for conclusions, making reclamation sustainable, you need a holistic approach. So you need an approach which fits in all these kind of aspects: social, economic, environmental, and also the policy aspects into reclamation processes. Sound land use planning and political economic perspective should be at least as good as for re-mining. So if the prices for tin are high, tin miners will go in. So we have to earn more from the land than from tin mining. So the long-term scenario, management scenario, local people have to benefit to take care about the land. And land use planning, identifying markets and plant selection in the mountains is critical. So you always have to somehow do a survey at the beginning, or do you have a land use planning, as I told before, for the different sites, because in our example, it was near enough for the local market, but it was too far away for bigger cities to produce much vegetables. So its land use planning is also critical in my eyes for reclamation. And good reclamation design includes flood risks, so on-site but also downstream. And thank you very much. This was the ceremony, the opening ceremony, or the passing over ceremony from where the reclamation site was given to the government. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Terima kasih Pak Andreas, Pak Philip. Mungkin saya berikan beberapa catatan, mungkin Pak si beberapa bisa nambahkan karena mungkin terbatas mungkin apa yang saya peroleh. Kalau dari Pak Philip tadi yang pertama menjelaskan mengenai institusi Bgr sendiri. Jadi Bgr itu sebenarnya adalah departemen milik pemerintah ya, bukan swasta. Kemudian mengenai proyek kerjasama itu memang ada 3 tujuan. Pertama memang mereklamasi di air pundur. Air pundur ini di daerah penyamun Sungai Riak, dan itu wilayahnya sebetulnya baik, jadi milik PT Timah. Nah, kemudian tujuan kedua dari ini adalah untuk memfasilitasi ada menukar teknologi ya, antara misalnya dari PP, ITB termana ke masyarakat, ke PT Timah sendiri atau seterusnya. Itu adalah memfasilitasi itu. Kemudian yang terakhir sampai 2019 itu diakhiri dengan pembuatan handbook. Handbook tadi sudah ditunjukkan. Handbook itu sebenarnya dalam 2 bahasa, jadi itu gampang sekali kita lihat, dalam bahasa Inggris, bahasa Indonesia. Dan itu sebenarnya kalau mau sampaikan adalah salah satu pustaka untuk Magister in Agriculture. It's very important. I mean, it's very visual for the students. Kemudian motivasinya mengapa kok orang Bgr sampai ke sini itu selalu ditanyakan sejak 2016. Apakah ada motivasi tertentu mengapa Bgr datang ke Indonesia? Itu adalah pertama ya memang untuk mencari pengalaman, kemudian memang ada keinginan mengetahui supply chain ya, responsible supply chain karena apa? Karena tadi sudah dijelaskan oleh Pak Philip bahwa Jerman adalah importer di Indonesia untuk timah 26%, jadi tertinggi itu secara ekonomi memang Jerman berkepentingan. Lalu Jerman sendiri juga nomor 4 di dunia untuk mengimpor timah. Kemudian dalam hal ini Pak Philip sudah menyampaikan mengenai stakeholder siapa aja yang terlibat, yaitu dari Kelapa itu NGO, lalu juga kemasyarakatan, lalu dari akademik ada ITP, ada IPB. Selain itu dengan PT Timah sendiri. Kemudian disampaikan juga bahwa setelah kegiatan 2019 untuk horticulture itu kemudian berubah ke rencananya ke kelapa sawit begitu. Lalu di dalam area reklamasi itu tantangannya adalah erosi. Itu adalah erosi. Kemudian lalu juga tantangan yang disampaikan oleh Pak Andreas juga adalah bahwa tidak banyak masyarakat di sekitar lokasi itu adalah yang petani, jadi tidak bisa melanjutkan lagi untuk bertani. Namun juga BUMDes-nya juga untuk mendapatkan keuntungan dari kegiatan itu, dan masalah kepemilikan di tahun 2025 juga yang tadi disampaikan Pak Andreas menjadi masalah. Buku tadi sudah, dan tadi yang terakhir dari Pak Philip adalah masih ada monitoring jangka panjang. Ya, mengenai tanah itu sendiri, perkembangan tanah, soil development-nya, kemudian mengenai vegetation-nya, kemudian juga sosial ekonomik. Ya, itu mungkin menurut kita sebagai akademisi di UB, siapa tahu itu menjadi peluang juga untuk kita sebetulnya. Kemudian Pak Andreas tadi membicarakan banyak sekali teori tentang sustainability land management, jadi bagaimana pengelolaan tanah secara supaya bisa berkelanjutan. Kemudian terkait dengan pertambangan, karena penambangan di sini juga tanahnya rusak dan harus diperbaiki. Jadi ada beberapa hal disebut tadi, bagaimana mengontrol erosi, bagaimana meningkatkan cadangan air di dalam tanah. Lalu beliau menyampaikan mengenai fungsi-fungsi tanah, ya, bahwa tapi yang penting misalnya tanah disebut tidak dapat diperbarui tanah itu. Lalu contoh bahwa terjadi waktu beliau datang di bulan Februari, sekitar tanggal 8, itu flooding di Bangka, February 8, ya. Karena itu adalah ada rock dan juga karena curah hujan yang tinggi sekitar 300 mm dalam 3 hari waktu itu at that time. Jadi itu membuat banjir di Bangka. Lalu bicarakan fungsi tanah itu, input itu mahal dan terkait juga dengan gas rumah kaca, ya, kerusakan tanah itu. Kemudian menyampaikan mengenai skenario penggunaan lahannya, lalu juga menyampaikan peraturan perundang-undangan Indonesia sebenarnya juga bagus untuk menghindari pre-mining. Kemudian mengenai situasi di Bangka disampaikan, kemudian tantangannya itu adalah bahwa untuk meningkatkan tanah itu bahan organik, jadi sangat jarang sekali. Kemudian juga partisipasi masyarakat, community engagement-nya. Kemudian masalah tekstur, ya, tekstur yang dikatakan tadi, kalau daerah sini mungkin tinggal sandnya di sana, clay-nya yang di sana, itu disampaikan oleh. Nah, salah satu yang disampaikan Pak Andreas ini biochar tadi sebagai cara untuk memperbaiki tanah, ya. Kemudian juga menyampaikan mengenai pentingnya memperbaiki di daerah aliran sungai, watershed itu. Di daerah aliran sungai juga harus diperbaiki. Kemudian juga memperbaiki secara regulasi, improve land use planning, ya, termasuk harus membuat bisnis modelnya. Kemudian bagaimana meningkatkan tanahnya, begitu adalah dengan bahan organik, dengan arang. Kemudian masalah lain lagi, tantangan misalnya local marketnya yang tidak ada. Lalu kembali lagi mengenai kepemilikan setelah reklamasi itu berakhir. Kemudian reklamasi itu juga membutuhkan misalnya di Bangka itu perlu karena salah satunya jenis tanaman, harus mencari jenis tanamannya. Kemudian perbaikan peraturan diperbaiki, kejelasan kepemilikan tanah, lalu memikirkan mengenai co-funding, mungkin dari perusahaan atau dari investor, ya. Misalnya contohnya tadi danau Kolim itu yang dipergunakan untuk pariwisata misalnya. Nah, sebagai kesimpulan, memang dalam hal reklamasi perlu pendekatan yang holistik, termasuk perencanaan penggunaan tanah, partisipasi masyarakat, kemudian keterlibatan masyarakat itu sendiri, local people, kemudian juga mengenai harus mengetahui mengenai market, mengenai pasarnya, dan jenis tanaman yang dipilih supaya bisa ini. Lalu desain dari banjir. Saya kira itu yang disampaikan sejauh saya tangkap. Nanti mungkin Bapak Ibu atau saudara yang bisa menangkap yang lain lagi bisa menambahkannya. Terima kasih. Ada pertanyaan, Bapak? Bisa mungkin bisa dari ya nggak apa-apa, di situ aja nggak apa-apa, Pak.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Philip and Mr. Andres. I am Zul from Chan. We have black pepper.
We produce black pepper?
Yeah, we are black pepper producer here in Bangka. We are using natural farming for our input. And what I want to ask is first, about soil. What is the parameter that you are counting? What is the parameter, and how is the condition now from 0 to 100? What is the condition now? What is the hardest thing from this process, from this reclamation? And what is the cost, the most costly thing in this reclamation? What is the hardest thing beside the human side? Like you said that it's hard to gather people to farm in that land. Hardest thing aside from that, what is the hardest thing, and what is the costly part, the most costly in this reclamation? And the last thing is from this project, this pilot project, this reclamation. Can you conclude? Is it responsible or irresponsible? I mean, not is irresponsible, but is it responsible enough? The tin mining here, because we know that from what you conclude that the human, the farmer, is not going to use that land, so it's not good enough. It's not ideal enough. So what do you think from the perspective of your goal? Okay, thank you very much. That's all what I want to ask. Thank you.
May I start? Is it okay? Thanks for your questions. I think that's a very good questions. First of all, Philip already showed what's. If I open the slide again, what was the biggest cost of the land use? It was landscaping is a very big cost. That's I have to say this is very important. If you have the ponds and you have the hilly area, and this is really something what farmers don't want to invest money in. That's for sure, because it really did cost a lot of money. And also the planning and also the maintenance. The biochar was quite cheap, so this could buy quite cheap. But at least you also have to bring all these ingredients to the site to improve the soil. So for the farmers, for sure, I think the biggest challenge is the investment. I really have to say this, that you have to first invest quite a lot of money to the land to get benefits out of it again. And if we would have we have only done a small part of it for agricultural land, maybe a few hectares. I don't know exactly how much it was, depends on the forestry sector, forestry part. So the highest input of material went to this part. And therefore, it is true, if you want to use it for agriculture again, the investment is quite high. So this is maybe the biggest, depending on the, next to the people who didn't want to use it as farming area, the investment is maybe the biggest problem. So we would need subsidies or some other things from the government, or at least also to change the reclamation ideas, not only doing trees, not only not only reforestation. You should, at the beginning, think about what you want to do with the land afterwards. It doesn't make sense only to plant trees and then cut it and then make agriculture out of it. You should decide before you do the reclamation. So if Peditima then do the reclamation in the area, it may be also for their side, they may be interested to get benefits for the local people. But then they have to know if it's allowed to do agriculture at the end. So this is something that's the ownership is a big problem, and also the post-use after reclamation. And this is also the regulations, Indonesian regulations. It's not yet within these regulations that you can change land use systems. And therefore, in the reclamation process, we would need a process which includes all these ideas, that at the end you can directly do the reclamation for land use for post-land use, for post-land use mission somehow. And this is maybe from my side the biggest challenge in Indonesia. Maybe Philip, you would like to add something?
But first, maybe because initially he has some questions.
Yeah,
about
maybe
soil parameters and maybe
okay, soil parameters too, yes. You asked so many questions, so maybe I forgot something. About the soil parameters. Well, you know, the thing is about that in mining areas, we lose all the fine particles, so we have no organic matter inside anymore, almost nothing. You will only have sand and gravel. So if I say degraded land and not degraded land, the mining land, well, we didn't lose the land because we still have sand and gravel there. So we have maybe, we have still 20-30% of the capability of the soils in these areas. But to bring it up to 100% again, we need a high input. With the input we did in the agricultural land, we pushed it up to 100% again, because we really, we could, in this small area where we produced aubergines, we could produce 2 to 3 tons of aubergines in only 1 year, so it was quite a lot. It was quite similar, almost similar to the other farmland. So, but on the other hand, we had also the problem like pepper. We didn't grew pepper on the area because everybody told us it's not, because we are not a plants. I'm not an agriculturer. I'm not a plant specialist. But the other people who were working with us said pepper is very difficult. It wouldn't grow there. But maybe it's also even with biochar. Maybe we didn't try pepper because everybody told us no, pepper is too difficult on this kind of land. But sure, I don't know. Maybe there's also with biochar, with natural soil, with inputs, there's also a solution for pepper. But this we should also to find out again. So that's maybe another important thing which we have to find out for future reclamations. Which plants fit best which kind of soil improvement we do in here, or which plant needs which kind of soil improvement on these sites, on these fields. Noch irgendwas, was ich vergessen habe? Did I forget something else? No, another question. So if you have some other question, please try to tell, give it a, if I forget something, please ask again.
Did you try the black pepper?
No, we didn't try black pepper.
Because of the suggestion from other people.
Because of the suggestion of other people, we didn't try pepper. We wanted, but we didn't. Because everybody told us it won't grow very well.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. They told us, but we didn't try, so I can't tell you if it's...
And growing black pepper is really hard, even with the good soil.
Yeah, that's the thing about it.
And from 0 to 100%, how the improvement right now, and what are you monitoring in the this pilot project in soil or in the plant growth?
Yes, in the monitoring, we want to, the first thing we want to see the growth of the trees. And unfortunately, the problem is of ours that our agricultural system, the business model did not work. So it didn't continue. I have to say, we only had 1 year, the agricultural side, and afterwards, as also Philip told, it was bare land, and then acacia were growing and other things, and afterwards they were now growing palm oil trees. But we didn't, unfortunately, we couldn't continue the agricultural area. Sadly, I'm really sad about it because it showed that it works. But the people, the local people didn't want to support it, and Benedictima is no agricultural company, so they can't do it. So we would have needed a different investor. That's what I say, you always need a special investor to go on. And therefore, tree density, and also on the soil improvement based on, but especially in the forestry part, because the agricultural part we don't use, so the monitoring doesn't make sense somehow, that's not so good. But we see in the forestry part how fast the soil improvement is after the reclamation we did. Because we didn't put everywhere in all soils, you can't put add to all soils biochar or something like that. Oh, which soil parameters you mean also?
Yes.
Right, it's pH, it's available nutrients, it's cation exchange capacity, it's base saturation. What else? It's bulk density. It's the active carbon. So it's the carbon pools somehow. What kind of the important carbon pools in the soil? That's the main basic things we want to analyze. Thanks.
Did you report the success rate of the plan, or did all of the plan that you planted is gone? The orchard, I mean,
In the agricultural area?
Yes.
Yeah, they are all plants are gone. Yes.
Because there's no maintenance.
There's no maintenance. Yes.
But we have data on the viability of the agricultural plants from the first year. So we know, but I did not show it, but we have a diagram. No, it's not in the presentation, but the data is there. But we cannot show it now quickly. But if you want to know, you can send me an email, I'll send it to you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. It's really open eyes for me, because we have so many homework from this particular problem, and thanks for the Bgr to pilot this project, and now we knew what we have to improve and what can we do better in future. Thank you very much.
But just want to say, because you're interested in pepper, as I mentioned in the Reclamation Handbook, in the annex,
Yes.
we give information about other pilot projects. And some of them were growing pepper. So if you look in the handbook, you can find contact information for the other projects, and you can discuss with them if you're interested.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. We have connection too for some lecturer here in Bgr for pepper growing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Zulfan ya.
Ya.
Baik, Pak Zul, terima kasih. Mungkin ada pertanyaan lagi dari mungkin mahasiswa agroteknologi, biologi, atau siapa yang mau bertanya, atau alumni, karena ada alumni. Ya, alumni, silakan Rizky, alumni biologi.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Rizky. I'm alumni from this department. So, in order to make this ex-mining area become productive land, one of the strategy is crop. My question is there a consideration for the concern that this crop may be contaminated by the heavy metal regarding to its health effect, and how do you resolve that to support this long-term growth? Thank you.
So in the beginning, we did this study which was done by ITB, Bandung, Pakudi, and they analyzed if there was contamination, if I remember correctly. And they said it is not really contaminated in terms of heavy metals. It's really, the main point of this is if you do the tin mining, the physical separation process is that you concentrate the heavy minerals, which includes the tin ore, the cassiterite, and other heavy minerals. And so what you leave behind is, I think, not so rich in the different metal particles. But the problem is more that it's very coarse-grained and that it's very infertile. So that is what we found there. I think it can be different in other sites which have more intense mining activities than this area. So it really depends. But in that case, the study found that there was no major contamination. Nothing which was above any levels.
May I add also something? Yeah, if you see that from the soil science perspective, it's absolutely true that the heavy metal, the total heavy metal content in these soils is very low. And it's also important the available heavy metals, and they are also not very high. It's not that you can't. I think heavy metal pollution is not really a big problem in mining areas, because it's also the physical separation. It's only a separation of the minerals, and but this tin, for example, tin or so, is kept in the minerals. It's not available for plants in the long for agriculture. So I think it's, for my eyes, you should always study. You should always have samples for it. It's for sure. It's always better to control it. But I think it's not a big problem.
Some areas, when you do tin mining, when you enrich heavy metals physically, you can get increased levels of radioactivity, but it will still be on a very low level in general. When you have other types of mineral deposits, which have sulfide minerals, then you have more problems with heavy metals. But here, because cassiterite is an oxide, usually the process is easier to manage.
Oke, cukup? Ya. Jadi kalau pertanyaan Rizky tadi itu sudah dijawab bahwa untuk kandungan logam beratnya nggak ada rendah ya, masih di bawah baku mutu kira-kira mungkin yang dijawab itu. Kemudian juga secara geologi kenapanya kaitan dengan karena cassiterite oksid itu, jadi mungkin juga tidak akan banyak sekali ada logam beratnya yang berbahaya gitu ya. Levelnya tidak tinggi maksud saya gitu. Kalau tadi jawaban dari Pak Zul tadi kaitan dengan yang terberat itu ya karena untuk memperbaiki tanah tadi ya Pak Zul ya, selain bahwa mengenai partisipasi masyarakat, kemudian juga mengenai lada tadi sebenarnya tidak ada pengalaman untuk menanam lada, tapi karena lada juga sulit walaupun masyarakat mintanya demikian. Tapi sebenarnya secara penelitian sudah ada beberapa penelitian tentang itu ya. Saya mau nanya Pak Risma tapi sudah keluar. Karena juga ada penanaman lada, tapi sekarang juga ada lada di bekas tambang timah sebenarnya. Cuman hasilnya mungkin ya apakah dievaluasi dengan ini mungkin belum, tapi sudah ada dilakukan oleh sporadis beberapa petani. Saya kira itu. Kalau ada pertanyaan lagi dari mahasiswa atau Pak Guru tadi sebenarnya sosiologi sudah keluar sudah. Oh ya silakan Pak Rahmat silakan Pak.
Thank you for presentation. Philip and Dr. Bgr. I'm interested in your activity about the project of reclamation, especially in your activity about soil treatment before vegetation maybe. As you said previously that you use or edit some organic material like oil palm waste or chicken manure to enhance the availability of nutrient in the soil. My question is, did you use maybe some biofertilizer or maybe some commercial product or maybe using some microbial with specific activity like phosphate solubilization maybe in your project? And last one, maybe do you think using or addition of some organic material is economic for reclamation program? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for this question. Yeah, that's a difficult question, or let's say that's a very good question. The problem about in Bangka is really the availability of organic matter. So we didn't really check different substrates. We only used one kind of mixture, which was biochar from the palm oil industry. So the palm oil industry, they use the palm oil branches, the fruit branches, to burn, to get heat. They burn it, and this remains a lot of black carbon or a lot of charcoal. When I would say charcoal, it's remaining with a lot of ash. And this is a lot available on Bangka, so it's very cheap. So this is the second question. So we tried also to use something which is very cheap. You could also use limestone. What was the other? Was dolomite. You could also use dolomite instead of the ash of the fruit branches. Is similar to use dolomite, but it's cheaper than to use dolomite. Therefore, I think this kind of charcoal is quite. It has quite a lot of benefits. It's a substitute to dolomite. It gives a lot of organic matter inside, so it's good for water holding capacity, but it's also good for nutrient to store nutrients in the soil, to keep the nutrients in the soil. But the biochar has no nitrogen inside. It has phosphorus maybe inside, but no nitrogen and other easily volatile organic nutrients. Therefore, you also have to add additional nutrients. And we only used rice husk as again organic matter, but then we used conventional fertilizer. So no, we used chicken manure, no conventional. So chicken manure has a lot of nitrogen inside, and then you use leguminose and other trees which can get the nitrogen out of the air. So this decision, well, there was our best. It was Sifu Apu, the company who did all the work. He was also Saragi. He did also. We were talking a lot with him about what's available on the island, on Bangka, and he had given us these good suggestions about what he ideally used. I myself also did work a lot with biochar in Germany, and therefore I knew that biochar is really a good way. You have to use always biochar with organic matter, with an organic, nutrient-rich material. This combination is always very good. And for sure, you can also use compost. Compost is also perfect in other things. And you could also use a compost biochar combination. But the thing is always the price is the problem. Compost is too expensive to really. If you get a cheap compost, you can also use the compost for sure. But on the other hand, we didn't check different kind of substrates. It would have been too much work at the end of this process. Could I answer your question, or do you?
I think you mentioned about the bacteria. Mungkin begitu.
Additional bacteria and other things. Well, we did not really do this in this project, I have to say. But also, again, biochar is good for microbes or earthworms like biochar, for example. I know that I work in Germany. I work together with an agriculturer, and they use special bacteria, or also sorry, I forget the word in English. Special fungi for the to improve plant growth. You can do this. You can also add these things. You can, yes, it would improve, I think, the situation. But I don't have an experience about it.
Like mycorrhiza?
Mycorrhiza, yes, thanks. That's what I want to say. Yes, yeah. mycorrhiza. They use the farmers using mycorrhiza and other special bacteria to improve plant growth on their fields, and it works. So also here mycorrhiza or other things could work to improve, even improve further the development of the plant. Absolutely, but we didn't check.
Ya, terima kasih. Mungkin ada lagi, mungkin mahasiswa sekarang. Waktunya tinggal 15 menit. Saya persilakan mahasiswa. Mungkin yang bertanya. Berapa? Mahasiswa dulu, mahasiswa. Gak ada yang bertanya? Oh, oke, silakan.
Okay, permission. Thanks for your presentation, sir. Mr. Phillips and Ms. Agnes. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Putri Atuliana. I'm from majoring in agrotechnology. Maybe my question is a bit simple. How's your opinion? And maybe can you tell something about how the miners carry out good mining activities and do not damage or disturb other environment? Because basically, mining activities can make change to the environment. Or there are any special tips, maybe? I think that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So most of the tin production in Bangka nowadays comes from the offshore mining, and some of the production here onshore, which is still taking place, this is informal. And so if you have informal mining, it means there's nobody who has really a legal responsibility to manage environmental impacts. It's taking place informally on the mining concession of somebody else, but then the company can say, we are not responsible, it is the informal miners who do that damage. So the best way actually to deal with it is if you would formalize the informal mining. You can do that in the law. There's a process called Bgr. It's like a zone for artisanal, for informal miners. I'm not sure if you have some in Bangka. I know you have some zones like this on Belitung. I think it is a regency or it's a provincial government who has to designate them. I think even the regency, do you know that? Bgr?
It's Bangka and
Yeah, you have some here in Bangka? Only on Belitung. Yeah. But so the advantage is if you have a Bgr, then you can have an official control of that site, and then you can manage environmental impact, and you can also manage health and safety impact to avoid accidents. But if it's informal activity, it is the same everywhere in the world, in every country. I mean, informal tin mining in Bangka is similar to informal tin mining in Africa. There you have even more problems and nobody is supervising it. So the best way to deal with it is if the government finds a way to formalize it and to control it. And then the question of reclamation, it is also related to that. Because if you formalize it, then you can define the responsibility for the reclamation. The challenge with reclamation and informal mining is, in order to do reclamation, you need money. So the informal miners, they take all the money and then they go away. So there's no money left for the reclamation. But when you do industrial mining, usually you, as a company, you're required to make a guarantee for the reclamation, or even you have to pay every month because you have to do progressive reclamation while you're mining. So it means they are saving the money while they are selling minerals, while they are having profit. And the informal miners, they take the profit, but they don't save anything for the reclamation. So that is the same problem in many places in the world.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, sir.
Jadi pertanyaannya mengenai praktek pertambangan yang baik ya.
Karena pada dasarnya kan bisa merusak lingkungan.
Iya, lalu bagaimana caranya? Tapi salah satu solusinya karena di mana-mana juga sama seperti itu. Kalau makanya diperlukan ada kooperasi ya, kooperasi penambang. Saya kira juga mungkin ada yang dikelola oleh PT Timah juga kan ya, namanya kooperasi itu. Sehingga masyarakat itu dimasukkan dalam kooperasi sehingga nanti juga ada kewajiban untuk mereklamasi Iya. Iya. Lalu juga saran dari Pak Philip itu di penambangan rakyat itu juga tolong diformalkan gitu mungkin ya, ya. Mungkin gitu. Masih ada pertanyaan mahasiswa mana yang mau ditanya ini? Nggak ada yang nanya mahasiswa. Ada? Yang lain? Ya, dari biologi nih, yang punya hajat nih. Ya, mana dari biologi? Satu aja, masih ada waktu. Oh, tadi berani dia mau nanya, tapi sekarang nggak ada yang mau nanya.
Bahasa.
Silakan dalam bahasa Indonesia aja, nanti terjemahkan Bu Rusni. Yuk, satu. Mau ada dosen-dosen biologinya banyak, ada Pak Kacur baru ya. Ya, ya. Ayo, ya, sebentar Kak Sur. Kalau ada dari mahasiswa, satu dulu. Ya, silakan.
Baiklah, terima kasih atas kesempatannya. Saya izin bertanya terkait cadangan karbon yang ada di tanaman. Apakah itu dapat mempengaruhi reklamasi habitat pertambangan dan kira-kira bagaimana cara menghitungnya? Terima kasih.
Carbon in plants? Oh, okay. How to the plants can help the carbon in plants help to, it's nutrient recycling or plant recycling is always very important for reclamation or for the improvement of the soil in the long term. Yeah, probably yes.
Perlu diterjemahkan nggak? Nggak usah ya? Oh, perlu.
Okay. Not changing. No. Absolutely. That's an important thing in all getting fertile soils again. Is the plant input but it's the root input, but it's also the dying plants, which increase the long-term organic matter again and nutrients again in the soil. So the living plants are very important. Yeah, the dying plants and the roots add organic matter into the soil. Yeah, yes, the normal roots. And we add nutrients with the plant, with the dying.
With the summary of your answer.
Yeah, I think so. There was the part.
Jadi penting untuk mendapatkan tanah yang subur. Itu juga bisa berasal dari tanaman yang mati dan juga dari akar yang sudah mati, juga dia bisa menambahkan unsur hara.
Okay, okay. What is to say? It's if you know, the bigger, the more plants will grow on the side, you will have more organic recycling.
Oke, semakin banyak tumbuhan yang tumbuh di situ, semakin banyak siklus organik yang terjadi di area itu.
And on the other side, therefore, we also use some leguminous. So we need special plants to bring nitrogen into the system. And if these plants die again, other plants can use the nitrogen.
Juga kita perlu tanaman leguminous. Ini adalah tanaman yang cukup khusus, bermanfaat untuk menambah nitrogen. Nanti kalau dia sudah mati, dia juga nanti akan memberikan nutrisi kepada tanaman yang baru.
Yes. So therefore, plants are always, the nutrient cycling of plants is always very important.
Jadi siklus nutrien atau siklus unsur hara itu sangat penting dalam pertumbuhan tanaman.
Bagaimana pertanyaan? Apakah pertanyaan lebih ke carbon stock-nya? Carbon stock, jadi bagaimana mengukur carbon stock di tanah dan juga di tumbuhannya? Dan juga di tanah atau di tumbuhannya? Oke.
carbon stock
Yeah.
in the region? How do you
To measure.
How to measure it?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very difficult question. Well, you can, it's different approaches, but it's the easiest way to measure or to even monitor this carbon amount is by drone modeling somehow, let's say it this way. Using a drone, and then you can make a 3D model of your vegetation. And with this 3D model, you can estimate your amount of plants which are in the field. But you have to know also the plant species and the other things. But I'm not a real forester, I have to say. There may be also better solutions for this.
Ada beberapa approach pendekatan. Jadi mungkin yang paling gampang untuk mengukur atau memonitor karbon ini adalah dengan menggunakan modeling yang dilakukan melalui drone. Jadi nanti dari drone keluar model 3 dimensinya, kemudian kita bisa melihat vegetasinya ada berapa banyak di sana, jumlahnya bisa diprediksi, kemudian tapi juga harus mengetahui spesies apa saja yang ada di sana. Tidak melalui spesies yang ada di sana, kemudian jumlahnya itu baru bisa diprediksi berapa karbonnya. Pak Andreas bukan orang yang ahli kehutanan, jadi dia tidak bisa spesifik memberikan jawaban.
Ya. Baik, tadi Pak Zul, mungkin ada pertanyaan singkat Pak Zul.
Singkat sekali.
Ya.
This is the last question for me because we are the company not only growing black pepper, but we are practice natural farming and agroforestry in our land, and we are going toward the landscape restoration too. So my question is there any project like this that will be going next time, and can we join hand or can we
Be part of it or something?
Work together?
Work together?
Yeah, work together because we have a record for doing project like this, and what the biggest problem for this project is our work, because we are maintaining the project side.
In the long term, yes.
Yeah, in the long term, and we are ongoing now. I think we are in the 4th year in agroforestry project with Netherlands company and consultant from Brazil, agroforestry consultant from Brazil, and Renature from Netherlands too. So, is there any project, next project from this, the next step that, yeah, maybe we can discuss, because the problem here is you really, it's really hard to find people who can maintain the, and yeah, it is possible because yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next project that we will have here, the next cooperation project, will be bigger than the past project, the PCE. And basically, I think it will be possible to exchange with many stakeholders, and you are welcome to participate there. But it will not happen immediately. This project now is just in the planning phase, and it will start to be implemented maybe in 1.5 years. But yeah, if you give me your contact details, then when we do these planning missions, maybe we can have already a discussion about it.
Baik, terima kasih. Saya kira pertanyaan Pak Isul itu lebih ke ajakan kerjasama ya Pak Isul ya. Dan saya kira Pak Isul itu mengatakan senang sekali untuk kerjasama ya. Baik, mungkin ada pertanyaan lagi. Terakhir, sementara ini memang ada pertanyaan dari mahasiswa pasca sarjana di online, tapi mungkin karena waktu mungkin bisa dijawab mungkin belakangan ya Bu Rusni ya. Oke, ya. Nah, kalau ada lagi pertanyaan dari yang audiens di sini sebelum kita selesai. Oke, pertanyaan atau informasi tambahan lagi dari Bapak Ibu guru yang lain? Ya, silakan Ibu.
Saya dengan bahasa Indonesia ya. Baik, perkenalkan saya Jane. I'm Jane. Dari Fakultas Hukum Law. Jadi saya tidak tanya soal biologinya LNG. Jadi saya mau tanya, bisa nggak diceritakan reklamasi yang ada di Indonesia dengan penelitian sebelumnya di luar negeri untuk melihat apakah sudah efektif si reklamasi yang ada di Indonesia ini. Kemudian itu yang yang kedua, dari sekian banyak jenis reklamasi, apakah dimungkinkan menutup lubang penambangan untuk sebagai salah satu reklamasi yang lebih baik for better reclamation? Saya mau lihatnya begini, lokasi reklamasi ditanami dengan tumbuhan, apakah lebih baik dengan yang terbuka dengan lubang atau yang sudah tertutup seperti ponds or with the ponds already reclaimed? Terima kasih. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those questions.
Tidak perlu ditulis.
Okay, if there's any clarification, you tell us. Yeah. So I think if you compare reclamation in Indonesia to other countries, something that I found is that in Indonesia, the government is trying to manage many details in the reclamation process. In other countries, I saw sometimes governments give more flexibility to the companies how to do it. And that allows the companies to find solutions which are working very well for specific locations where these companies are operating. For example, here in the regulations, you have performance indicators. If you want to get your reclamation guarantee back, you have to check all the performance indicators. In other countries, for example in Australia, I saw sometimes companies, they can propose their own performance criteria, which are directly adjusted to their specific mine, and they propose those performance indicators for their own mine to the government, and then the government can say, okay, we agree with you, let's use your indicators instead of the general ones. And I think that is a good process. If sometimes you have companies which operate really well and which have good ideas, so it is useful to give them flexibility to find the best solution, rather than to force them to do a solution which might not be the best solution in the end. That is for the large-scale industrial reclamation. When we talk about the reclamation of informal mines, small-scale mining, that is a challenge everywhere in the world. I think here in Bangka, actually, there is an opportunity to solve this because Petitima is really it's on the concession area of Petitima, and Petitima is in the end also a government-owned company. So I think because of that situation, sooner or later they can try to find solutions for that. In other countries in the world, the informal mining takes place in everywhere, so there's really nobody you can ask about doing the reclamation, and that is even a bigger challenge. And also in other parts of the world, you have conflict between informal miners and formal miners. They clash, and so the situation here in Indonesia is, for informal mining, I think it is easier to manage compared to some situations I know in Africa. And for the closure of the mine ponds, of the colons, it is what we showed. The landscaping work is very expensive, and so that is why I think many people prefer to not do it. And then they leave the colons open. But for safety reasons, it is usually good to close them, except if you want to have some colons for irrigation in the beginning of the reclamation process. And also, as Andreas was saying, when we are close to a river, it is good to have like a buffer zone. And those colons, they can also be like a buffer when you have floods. Even in Germany, for example, we have this what we call special basins. If there's a lot of rainfall, they can just store the rain. So instead of having too much flow of the water and it starts to destroy the infrastructure. So I think there can be a role for some big colons if they are very well planned. But the smaller ones, it is, I think, better for safety reasons to close if you have the money to do it.
I may add a little thing about it, because if during mining you've lost a lot of material to the river, to the sea, or so you may also not be able to close all ponds, because it's not enough material there. Especially on our side, we didn't have enough material to close all ponds, so we had to leave some open. You can use it for irrigation or for other things, or for natural habitat or something like this. But most close we could fill, but not all, because we didn't also have enough material to fill it. This is because it's also it's a money problem, and it's also a transport problem. If you want to fill everything, you would have to bring material from outside in, and this is too costly, and it's also not an environmental friendly.
Itu mungkin pertanyaan terakhir. Kalau ada mahasiswa, jadi pertanyaan Bucin tadi ada dua saya kira ya. Yang pertama mengenai perbandingan bagaimana penambangan di sini dengan di luar negeri. Kalau Habib mengatakan aturan di sini sangat detail sekali, Kalau di luar negeri seperti di Australia katakannya bahwa pemerintah memberikan kelonggaran bagi perusahaan untuk menentukan indikatornya apa saja. Kalau kita sudah ada checklistnya, itu yang pertama jawabannya. Yang kedua juga mengenai penutupan kolom, katanya ya sangat mahal, lalu juga tidak mungkin juga kata Pak Andreas semua harus dimasukkan kembali seperti itu. Kira-kira mungkin katanya itu yang kalau ada harus prosesnya buffer kalau ada aturan kalau dekat dengan sungai dan segala macam. Mungkin itu yang saya bilang baik, mungkin apakah ini sudah berakhir kelihatannya ya. Jadi masih ada homework for you both. There's a lot of questions in the online ya. Masih ada pertanyaan dari post-graduate students. Ya. Saya kira mungkin dalam kesempatan yang lain, saya kira saya ucapkan terima kasih banyak Pak Philip, Pak Andreas atas ini kesetiaannya. Saya kira juga nanti beberapa mungkin saya sampaikan sedikit sebetulnya ada beberapa hal yang mengenai mungkin virtual seminar di kesempatan lain, tidak hanya dari departemen biology, juga departemen yang lain. Virtual seminar maybe from Germany, yeah.
Okay, for what reason?
No, sorry.
You mean a virtual?
Yes.
What kind of?
Yeah, about
is there questions that you mean? Yeah. Always a possibility to have a video conference or something like this.
Lalu juga saya menunggu juga mungkin untuk monitoring jangka panjang yang mungkin mengenai social development, kemudian development, lalu social economic yang mungkin UBB bisa terlibat dalam hal ini. Lalu juga ada pertanyaan apakah your PowerPoint you can share with us the PowerPoint you have? Okay, yes. Lalu saya kira mungkin about radioactivity the last research, we have done some measurement of the radioactivity, working together with the Batam, a national agency for the nuclear, but we still are writing it before we publish it. So, yeah, at that point maybe later we will publish about it, and also the heavy metal on the plant tissue and also in the soil itself. Dan terakhir mungkin permintaan beberapa kawan termasuk saya, is that apakah mungkin Bgr bisa memberikan tempat di UBB sini semacam beberapa ratus meter persegi atau 1000 hektar itu adalah tailing supaya menjadi tempat untuk research bagi student di sini dan juga dosen di sini. Jadi kayak lokasi di sini itu dibuatkan mungkin 3 meter jalan, tapi itu adalah tailing pasir, lalu mungkin ada semacam tempat untuk kolom-kolom buatan begitu, sehingga mahasiswa dan dosen bisa research di dalam kampus ini. Semacam like greenhouse, but it's not greenhouse, but it's like a small area for sand tailing with maybe 3 meters there. And then we can doing some research for students and also the faculty members. Yeah, I don't know if we are planning in the future. Yeah.
Maybe in a future project, but we have to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too early now.
Too early to say.
Okay. Okay. Ya, saya kira itu untuk menutup acara ini mungkin saya minta ada Ibu Ketua Departemen mungkin akan menyerahkan semacam sertifikat untuk khusus ini. Dr. Henny is our department head of biology, and then she will be promoted as the vice dean in the new case. And Dr. Lingga is the head of department.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Silakan Bu.
Thank you very much.
Di foto dulu kali, udah?
Thank you. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Angel, thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you very much. Mungkin foto bersama dengan ibu-ibu dan bapak ya, monggo Pak. Ya. Berdua. Ya, silakan. Foto dulu kan kursinya. Ya. Satu lagi kali.
Pak Edi kita ikutan.
Iya Pak.
Ya, ya.
Ini my boss ini. Go, satu lagi. Oke, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pak Edi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your initiative.
That's very good.
So, how do we come to this?